In this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Cuba, what's going on there, what's not going on there, what we're not hearing from the White House, what we're not hearing from people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, and also what I'm hearing from some leftist websites who are putting out propaganda to say, hey, it's no big deal. You know, it's America's fault as well. So it's interesting, misinformation. I went through some of this. I'm going to cover some of that in detail, and we're going to start right now. Hey, my name is Kyle, and welcome to the channel. Please consider liking and subscribing. Now, unless you've been under a rock the past couple of days, the Cuban government has been trying to suppress an uprising that's going on right now on the streets of Cuba. There's been people coming up, marching on the Capitol in neighborhoods to protest their disdain of what's happening. I put it that way because there's a contested notion that it could be because of the coof, right? Or it could be because of communism. My take is it's communism simply because the White House refuses to talk about it. Because it seems like when it comes to communism, dealing with Venezuela or Cuba, when it goes horribly wrong, which is like every single time, people like Bernie Sanders and AOC never want to come out and say anything about it. So that's number one. Number two, because people on the streets themselves are saying, hey, this is not about the coof. This is about communism. It's about freedom. And if you've gone to our website in the past 48 hours, you will see a ton of Instagram videos on that, links from different sites from the ground in Cuba, because what's happened there is the communist government has actually removed internet access from people, and they're basically going straight brown shirts into neighborhoods, into homes, taking people off of YouTube channels when they're doing a live stream. Anything they can do to squash the actual voice that's coming out of there. So we've linked several videos on our site on that. I'm going to point out a few right here. So here on theconservativetake.com, you come down here, you'll see the feeds here for Instagram. And the first one I want to point out to is this one right here. And this is a response to Black Lives Matter, who had a press release who basically said that it's America's fault and that we should be diligent against America and our policies to suppress the Cuban people. I'm not going to read all this, but I am going to read the actual quote from this particular channel that I actually got this from. And this is translated from Spanish, and it is this. Remember when the Black Lives Matter protests that it was not a movement in defense of African Americans and human rights? We denounced that this was a Marxist and anti-American organization. Here are the tests. They have published a statement blaming the U.S. for what is happening in Cuba and praising the Castro regime. Many people, including Cubans, accused us of being racist or saying that it was a communist organization that it only had an agenda to destabilize the country and engender hatred against the police and institutions which used African Americans to implement that agenda and profit. Well, here is the evidence. What are those Cubans going to tell us who today are full of pain in the time wrote to us, offended by this very thing we are saying? Now, again, this is an English translation, so it's probably worded a little differently, but here's the actual full translation there. The point of it being is that Black Lives Matter is doing a gaslighting, saying, hey, it's not communism, it's America's policies. They always accuse the people who are conservatives or on the right of what they're actually doing. This is a fine example. It's straight out of the Saul Alinsky playbook, okay? And this is something that we just need to be mindful of. That whenever something like this happens, they're going to gaslight and they're going to turn around and say, hey, no. They're guilty of this, when in reality, they're the ones who are guilty of it. So that's from a organization in Cuba on the ground floor, and they have a bunch of videos out there that we've highlighted here as well. I'm also going to put one here. This is from Colin Kaepernick, of course. This is a meme which basically depicts him as being someone who is being disingenuous because he's saying, hey, he hates America but loves oppressive communist dictatorships. Remember when he had that shirt with Castro on it, basically with the Malcolm X hat saying, hey, you know, Cuba's great, Castro's great. But they don't understand, or they don't want you to understand what communism really is. And even the White House now, you have the White House press secretary who refuses to say that communism is the real reason Cubans are fleeing, protesting in the streets. She says, quote, they are opposed to the oppression of the mismanagement of the government in the country. And basically what this guy here tweeted saying, yeah, ma'am, you just described communism, okay? Then you have people like AOC and her squad they are really quiet because of what's going on with the communist protests in Cuba. Then you have Ben Shapiro gave us this great tweet here to Bernie Sanders. He says, "I can't help but to notice that you have yet to comment on the Cuban dissident movement. Perhaps you might spare a moment when you're not demagoguing capitalism from your lake house." And there are 10 more videos and articles out there just like this that basically are going to show you that the Democrat Party is going to gaslight to say, hey, it's America's fault. It's not, communism, because they're actually communists. They don't want people to equate not having food, not having water, not having security, having people coming to your house and bum rush, pull you out of your home while you're doing a live stream across the pond somewhere to tell the world how you're feeling, how you're doing, how you're being mistreated. Yeah, that's not something that they want to show on TV or in the media here to depict what communism is all about. Not to mention, they also announced this. You will not come. The U.S. will not accept refugees fleeing Cuba or Haiti by boat, Mayorkas says. So, it's okay if you come from Mexico across the border, because generally speaking, those people are going to be voting Democrat. In contrast, people who come from communist countries like Cuba into America, guess what? They don't vote for Democrats. They don't vote for socialism. They don't vote for communism, okay? And that's a big problem for Democrats. And so, obviously, this is a political issue. So I decided to go out and look for myself because I'm not that versed that much what's going on in Cuba. I'm going to say this has kind of been thrust on me, so I'm kind of catching up. I wanted to find out what the other side was saying. What are they saying? Why is the left able to get away with supporting Castro and Che and communism in a society right now where we can look on YouTube or anywhere and see that communism has failed and failing horribly? Venezuela, Cuba, all over the place, North Korea. So what's up with that? How are they able to get away with that? Well, I found this propaganda website called Red Youth, and in this article, it said everything Turning Point USA tells you about Cuba is a lie. First of all, that in and of itself should just clue you in there. Turning Point USA, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, went to Cuba and filmed a documentary. It's on YouTube. It's a really good video. I'll put a link below. And to show you what's going on behind the scenes and how it was, they're saying everything in that video is a lie, which is totally ridiculous because, first of all, the fact that they were there is true. So what you're seeing is true. So everything in the video, if the mere fact that they're actually there, isn't a lie. So that alone, the title is totally bogus, but I give them what they're trying to say. However, I read this article and I saw a couple things. First thing I noticed was that they're using a lot of propaganda terms, that kind of stuff, it kind of clues me in. Okay, well, and other things like that, propaganda terms. And secondly, they're not giving you any real evidence or sources for any of their claims. So I went in and looked at it just to see if I could find something to pull it apart. And the first thing that keyed into me, number one, was the whole deal with the infant mortality rate and also the literacy rate being very high, which it is. Supposedly, it's like nearly 100% in Cuba. But the counter to that, from other articles I read, is the fact that the state media wants Cubans to be able to read because that's how they give them the information, so they can brainwash them, so they can educate them, quote unquote, because they have to be able to read. And so that's number one. And number two, infant mortality rate is a bogus claim in many, many ways because doctors are incentivized to give false numbers because if they don't, they can get in trouble. So I found this article here from the Foundation for Economic Education, the myth of Cuba's glorious healthcare system. You come down to the section here, I'm going to read this part here, and there's so much more in this article that I can debunk, but I just want to give you an idea of how these propagandist websites misquote and mislead and misinterpret things to you to give you a different impression of what's really going on, because people typically don't go research for themselves. They just want to find something in articles so they can stake their flag on and hold their claim to their worldview so they can continue on thinking improperly. But here it says here that 3 academics in Texas Tech University found that a troubling data when it came to investigating the nation's health care system. It says with 11.1% of GDP dedicated to healthcare and 0.8% of the population working as physicians, a substantial amount of resources is directed towards reducing infant mortality and increasing longevity. An economy with centralized economic planning by government, like that of Cuba, can force more resources into an industry than its population might desire in order to achieve improved outcomes in an industry that the expense of the other goods and services the population might more highly desire. In other words, the government is saying we're going to put more emphasis on infant mortality and this, but more people may actually want other things on top of that. They may not want, people have the right to mitigate their own circumstances. So they may want food like on the table now, or they may want gas in their car so they can go here, or maybe they want a house that can sustain them and not leak. And so that's the kind of thing that it's saying here. It says that physicians are given health outcome targets to meet or face penalties. So if you're a physician and you have patients, you have to meet numbers, or otherwise you're going to face a penalty. This provides incentives to manipulate data. This is the same thing we were saying with the coof, right? With the numbers being inflated going on last year, okay? People were inflating the numbers to get government money, set-asides, for states and so forth. We saw that. But this provides incentives to manipulate data. Take Cuba's much-praised infant mortality rate, for example. In most countries, the ratio of the numbers of neonatal deaths and late fetal deaths stay within a certain range of each other as they have many common causes and determinants. Now get this, Cuba with a ratio of 6 was a clear outlier. This skewed ratio is evidence that physicians likely reclassified early neonatal deaths as late fetal deaths, thus deflating the infant mortality statistics and propping up life expectancy. Cuban doctors were recategorizing neonatal deaths as late fetal deaths in order for doctors to meet government targets for infant mortality. It goes on to say here that the bottom line is that the Cuban healthcare system is a hellhole and statistics from a repressive regime can't be trusted. And so there you have it. I just took one piece out of that propaganda website and I extrapolated it and found out the reasons for those numbers with clear sources, with clear data. That site didn't have any information at all other than name calling, propaganda messaging, and all kinds of weird stuff they were going on there, but nothing substantial to back up their claims. So on the surface, you say, hey, yeah, so low infant mortality rates. Yeah, that's great. You go out and do a Google and do the same thing. Oh yeah, you're right. It's about 97, 99, 98%. Perfect. Then that article is right. But why is it that? So you dig in deeper, you find out why it is. Number one, the common government can't be trusted because number one, they're mandating outcomes, which is bad. And number two, it's incentivizing doctors to recategorize things, fit the numbers, so they themselves don't get penalized. Point in all this is this. If that one article is wrong on those two separate things, one, everything being wrong about Cuba, even though they're actually in Cuba, and infant mortality rates being wrong as well, then what else are they also wrong about? So that's why Cuba is an important thing for us to talk about. That's why it's important for us to support them. Don't give in to the media talking about this narrative that it's America's fault. No, communism and socialism sucks. It killed over 100 million people in the last century alone. It is not good. And no, Denmark and the Scandinavian countries are not socialist countries. They are not. They may have socialist programs, but they are sitting on top of a capitalist-based system, which basically is funded because they don't have to worry about defenses because the U.S. will come to their aid in case of that. So their spending is totally on social programs because defense is not a high priority. So the important thing is this. What do you think about Cuba? Do you think it truly is a deal with the coof? Or is it really about communism like I do? And what do you think about the left totally being quiet on this whole thing altogether? And lastly, what do you think about the people on the left who back the Cuban government, who back communism? And we see right now that they have no basis in that, at least in the two issues I mentioned before. Let me know in the comments below. I'd be curious to know what you think. And if you like me doing this channel, we take pop culture and politics and filter to you in a conservative manner. In other words, filter to you right. Then please click the like and subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any future content. And also, there's a join button there. If you want to help support the channel, you can do that. And if you like what we do on this channel and see videos that you like, we have more picked up for you right here.